A History of Hispanic Achievement in America is the rich legacy of the 45 million Hispanic Americans living in the United States. It is a legacy that started 500 years ago when Christopher Columbus stepped ashore in the New World. It is a legacy of remarkable journeys of discovery by men like Francisco Coronado, Hernando de Soto, and Don Pedro Menendez. They were followed by others who carved out a civilization in the harsh, untamed wilderness of what would become the United States. It is a legacy that saw Spain's empire crumble, and in the mid-19th century saw Hispanics become American citizens. In the 20th century, there were great individual Hispanic achievers who fought for equality in education, politics, and business. This series is the untold story of Hispanic American achievements that are now part of the great American culture of the 21st century.
It's a little-known fact how Hispanic Americans helped defeat the British in the American Revolutionary War. That is just one of the stories in the third episode of A History of Hispanic Achievement in America. Hello, I'm Patricia Lopez. American Hispanic colonists, after 200 years of isolation, suddenly found themselves in a war for control of the North American continent by the mother countries of Spain, France, and Britain. By the time of the Revolutionary War, Hispanic America had been extended to Texas and California. However, 40 years after the war, Spain's North American empire crumbled, and those colonists would find themselves part of a new nation, Mexico. Hispanic Florida was thriving, so was Hispanic New Mexico. American Hispanic colonists now set their sights on present-day Texas. Father Antonio Margil de Jesus built a series of beautiful missions and in the process founded San Antonio, Texas.
From inside these mission walls in 1836, 187 Texans, Americans, and Hispanics gave their lives for Texas independence from Mexico. Located in San Antonio, the Alamo is perhaps the most famous mission in the United States. But the Alamo is much more than a symbol of Texan patriotism. It is one of the many Hispanic missions in Texas, a part of a rich legacy of Hispanic history that goes back nearly 100 years before the United States was founded. One man, an energetic Catholic priest, was instrumental in making the Texas missions successful. He was Father Antonio Margil de Jesus, and because of his unflagging efforts, San Antonio became a thriving settlement, and East Texas remained part of the Spanish Empire into the 19th century. By the 1600s, news from Spain of North America's rich and bountiful land had reached the rest of Europe. Other nations cast covetous eyes on the New World and sent out explorers to claim territory for their own empires. In 1688, France's most famous explorer, Robert La Salle, traveled down the Mississippi and claimed Louisiana for France. As a result, Spain sought to strengthen its hold over East Texas by sending Catholic priests and Franciscan friars to build missions and convert the Indians to Christianity. In 1690, missions were founded near the border between Louisiana and Texas. But within 3 years, they failed. 25 years would pass before more missions were established in the same region. Then, thanks to the efforts of the charismatic priest, Father Antonio Margil de Jesus, those missions would prevail, and a small settlement known as San Antonio would be founded. Indeed, the San Antonio missions would set the pattern of Hispanic settlement in Texas and later California. Missions to convert the Indians to Christianity. Military forts, known as presidios, to protect the missions. And then settlers brought in to establish a town near the missions and forts. Father Antonio Margil de Jesus was born in Valencia, Spain in 1657. At 16, he became a Franciscan friar. 10 years later, he received holy orders and was assigned to do missionary work in Spain's colonies, including founding the Missionary College of Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe de Zacatecas in central Mexico. In 1716, Margil traveled to East Texas, where the expedition of Domingo Ramon had established 4 missions, including one in present-day Nacogdoches. The following year, Margil helped found 2 more, Nuestra Señora de los Dolores and San Miguel de los Ades. But it was in 1720 that Margil made his greatest contribution to U.S. history by founding Texas's most successful mission along the banks of the San Antonio River. The San Jose y San Miguel de Aguayo Mission, commonly known as the San Jose Mission, was named for St. Joseph and the Marqués de San Miguel de Aguayo, who at the time was the governor of the province of Coahuila and Texas. Without the good father's leadership, Spain's presence in Texas would have failed. In all, 5 missions were built in the area: San Antonio de Valero Mission in 1718, Mission San Jose y San Miguel de Aguayo in 1720, and the missions Nuestra Señora de la Purísima Concepción de Acuña, San Francisco de Espada, and San Juan Capistrano in 1731. San Jose was the largest, the most successful, and the most beautiful of the San Antonio missions, and became known as the Queen of the Missions. It had 300 Indian novices, large fields, and herds of livestock. Like most missions, San Jose was made from stone and whitewashed adobe. It had ornate carvings and even wrought iron work. The buildings consisted of living quarters, a church, and granaries for food. Surrounding high walls protected the missionaries, colonists, and friendly Indians from attacks by Apache or Comanche warriors. San Jose would become a lasting symbol of the mission system and its success in securing the Spanish Empire's northern and eastern flanks. Father Margil's success with the San Jose mission spurred the founding of a community outside of its walls. In 1719, the region's governor suggested that Spain recruit hundreds of Canary Island families to settle eastern Texas. Colonization would help cement Spanish claims to Texas and block France's westward expansion from Louisiana. 12 years later, 16 Canary Island families, 55 people, settled near the San Jose mission. Within months of their arrival, the settlers had helped to establish the first and only civilian government in Texas, the village of San Antonio. In the centuries that followed, San Antonio would grow to become one of the Southwest's largest economic and cultural centers. And the 285-year-old San Jose Mission still stands as the historic jewel in the city's center. Father Margil died in 1726 and is now under consideration for sainthood by the Roman Catholic Church.
It was the greatest defeat suffered by the English colonists prior to the French and Indian War. It occurred at America's oldest city, St. Augustine.
When tourists travel to Spain's once powerful North American empire, St. Augustine, Florida's Castillo de San Marco is the premier attraction. It is a massive and imposing fortress built to guard Spain's northern flank in North America. Although attacked many times, it was never stormed nor taken. Using this impregnable fortress, Hispanic Governor Manuel de Montellano was able to protect Spanish Florida from English conquest during the wars of the 18th century. The Castillo de San Marco was built by Indian laborers, Hispanic soldiers, and colonists, and completed in 1687. A marvel of engineering, it was constructed from the tough, thick coquino stone found in the area. Indeed, so strong was its construction that English cannons could not breach its walls. And its strategic placement on the peninsula, guarding St. Augustine's harbor, made it possible for Florida's Hispanic governors to keep the Spanish Empire's northern flank secure in the first two-thirds of the 18th century. In 1700, Spain competed with France and England for control of the North American continent. She held Florida, Mexico, and parts of present-day Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. France occupied eastern Canada and controlled the Mississippi River. England ruled a narrow strip of land along the Atlantic seaboard from New England to Carolina. For 200 years, the Atlantic Ocean had served to keep Spain's North American colonies out of European conflicts. But with the coming of the 18th century, that would no longer be the case. Beginning with Queen Anne's War in 1702, Florida's governors would be forced to protect Spanish interests. Also known as the War of the Spanish Succession, the conflict began in Europe when Francis Louis XIV placed his grandson, Philip of Anjou, on the throne of Spain. The war quickly spread to North America because of Spain's slave sanctuary policy, which allowed all escaped slaves who reached Florida to become free. In December 1702, 1,000 Carolinians attacked St. Augustine to stop this policy. During the 1702 attack, the Spanish governor José de Zúñiga y Seda brought the townspeople and supplies into Castillo de San Marco. Though the English burned the city and destroyed the Franciscan missions, the townspeople were safe, and the colonists' plans to seize Florida were thwarted. From then on, Spain would militarily protect its North American colonies by relying on St. Augustine's massive fort to guard Florida. This strategy was justified 25 years later in the War of Jenkins' Ear. The war began in 1738 when Captain Robert Jenkins, one of the many English traders who smuggled goods into Spanish-controlled South America and Florida, was caught and his ear removed as a warning to other trespassers. In June 1740, American colonists under the command of General James Oglethorpe, Georgia's founder, attacked St. Augustine. They would have been successful except for the far-seeing vision of then Governor Manuel de Montiano. Montiano had eagerly enforced the slave sanctuary policy, angering slaveholders, particularly in South Carolina. Indeed, in 1738, he founded Fort Mose, the first free black community in the United States near St. Augustine. It was to this sanctuary that the leader of South Carolina's 1739 Stono Slave Rebellion was taking his people. These former black slaves had also formed their own militia, led by an escaped Carolina slave, Francisco Menendez. In June of 1740, Oglethorpe's army attacked St. Augustine and captured Fort Mose. Then on June 26, 1740, under the direction of Governor Manuel de Montiano, a force of Spanish regulars, dragoons, blacks, Indians, convicts, and urban militia led by Captain Menendez counterattacked, killing or capturing all but 24 of the invaders. Soon the siege of St. Augustine and the Castillo was over. The War of Jenkins' Ear ended in 1742, but hostilities between Spain and England in North America would continue. In 1756, the French and Indian War would once again pit England against France. In 1762, Spain entered the war on the side of France. And as a result, when France was defeated, Spain lost Florida in the 1763 Treaty of Paris, ending the war. In return, England gave back Cuba, taken in 1762, and recognized Spain's control of New Orleans and Upper and Lower Louisiana, west of the Mississippi. Oddly, Spain returned to Florida at the end of America's Revolutionary War, when, as an ally of the United States against the British, she regained her most prized possession, St. Augustine, and the fort, Castillo de San Marco, only to have it ceded to the United States in 1819.
The legacy of Hispanic California goes back to one man. Through almost superhuman efforts, Father Junipero Serra built California's famous mission system, a system of missions that extends from San Diego to San Francisco.
Along the El Camino Real in today's California can be found a series of beautiful Spanish missions, living testaments to the spirit of their founder, Father Juniper Serra. On this site in San Diego in 1769, this Spanish priest founded his first California mission. Father Serra at that time was 56 and in poor health. Yet he worked tirelessly for the next 15 years at converting Indians to Christianity and establishing 9 of the eventual 21 missions along the El Camino Real. Politically, Spain, which occupied parts of present-day Florida, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas, sought to protect her holdings in the New World. The reason Spain sent Father Juniper Serra and others to build missions throughout the Southwest was to establish a buffer for her Mexican colony against Russian expansion from Alaska. California would continue to serve that purpose for the next 80 years until the gold rush of 1849, when an independent Mexico would lose California to the United States as a result of the Mexican-American War. However, the spirit of Father Serra and the Spanish mission tradition can still be felt throughout California today.
In the next 2 segments, we shall see how Hispanic colonists fight for American independence from Britain and then their own independence from Spain.
Here on the Gulf Coast of Texas lies the oldest deepwater port west of the Mississippi River. The port of Galveston was founded in 1830, but its name goes back 45 years. In 1785, Hispanic surveyors named the bay and the island for Bernardo de Galvez, the Hispanic hero of the American Revolutionary War. Indeed, while the story of Lafayette and France's help in America's fight for freedom is well known, sadly, the equally heroic story of Galvez's brilliant generalship in the cause of American independence is barely known at all. Spain and Britain had been enemies dating back to the 16th century, when English privateers had attacked Spanish treasure ships returning from Mexico. Then in 1588, England defeated Spain's great invasion fleet, the Grand Armada. A series of battles and wars followed over the next 200 years, with England generally gaining the upper hand. In the last of these wars, the French and Indian War, Spain sided with France against Britain's American colonies. The 2 European powers lost what would be the decisive battle for North America. Spain, especially, lost her 250-year-old Florida territory to Britain. After that, Spain had been looking to even the score with her old enemy. The American Revolutionary War was just such an opportunity. Bernardo de Galvez was born to a noble family in Malaga, Spain, around 1746. Following in the footsteps of his father, at the age of 16, Galvez joined the army. By 1768, he made captain and was sent to Mexico, where he distinguished himself leading several major expeditions against the Apache, who were raiding Hispanic settlers in Sonora province. In 1772, he returned to Spain and was given the rank of colonel after the Battle of Algiers in 1775. In 1776, Galvez returned to North America, this time to New Orleans in the Louisiana Territory. Here, destiny would lead him to greatness. Late in 1776, at the age of 29, he was appointed governor. he immediately began trading with the fledgling United States, shipping tons of badly needed war supplies, arms, ammunition, military material, and money to General George Washington and the frontiersman George Rogers Clark. At the same time, Galvez strengthened Spain's presence at New Orleans by recruiting hundreds of refugees from the Canary Islands and providing them with land, cattle, and farming equipment. After France joined the Americans in their fight for freedom in 1778, Spain followed suit a year later. Galvez's reaction to Spain's declaration of war was instantaneous. Now leader of Spain's colonial forces in North America, Galvez raised an army, which included Creoles, Native Americans, and free blacks. 2 months later, Galvez was ready. He marched on the heavily fortified British garrisons at Baton Rouge and Natchez. A year later, he took Mobile, and a year after that, Pensacola in western Florida. In each case, Galvez's brilliant tactics allowed him to defeat stronger forces in entrenched positions. As a result of Galvez's triumphs, Britain's efforts against Washington's army, especially in the South, were greatly weakened. After George Washington's final victory at Yorktown in 1781, Galvez helped the American, French, and Spanish allies write the treaty, ending the war in 1783. As a result of Galvez's efforts, Spain regained Florida in 1784. And in 1785, Spain's King Carlos III rewarded Galvez by promoting him to Viceroy of New Spain. In addition, the American Congress cited Galvez for his aid during the war. However, perhaps because of his early death 2 years later at age 38, his and Hispanic Americans' contributions to the founding of the United States have largely been lost. In the 21st century, Hispanic Americans are like all other U.S. citizens, part of a great nation made stronger by the diversity of its population, a population coming from every continent, every nation, every race. Yet the journey to becoming Americans in Spain's northern colonies was a long and at times very difficult road, filled with many challenging twists and turns. It began at the opening of the 19th century, when, like the English colonists a generation earlier, Spanish colonists were creating their own American identity, very different from their Spanish forebearers. And like the English colonists, seeking this new identity would lead to a fight for independence. The creation of a Hispanic identity, separate from a mother country of Spain, happened many times throughout Spain's vast Western Empire. Indeed, Spain was the West's first superpower since the fall of Rome more than 1,000 years earlier. And by 1776, her empire stretched from Tierra del Fuego at the tip of South America to Canada. The jewels in the crown of the empire were her northern colonies, California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Yet within 2 generations, the peoples of Spain's American colonies would free themselves, leaving only the Caribbean islands of Cuba and Puerto Rico. For American Hispanics and the emerging Hispanic American identity, the most important independence movement would be the liberation of Mexico in 1821. In South America, the leader of the independence movement was a Spanish aristocrat from Caracas, Venezuela, Simón Bolívar, known throughout South America as the Liberator. But the independence movement in Mexico took a different route. It began with a remarkable call for freedom by a humble priest. On September 16, 1810, Father Miguel Hidalgo y Castilla, from the town of Dolores, delivered a speech, the Grito de Dolores, the Cry of Dolores. He rallied Indians and mestizos towards independence with a shout that swept the country, "Let Mexicans govern Mexico!" His call of freedom echoed the words of Thomas Paine's Common Sense, which in 1776 rallied Americans to govern themselves as Americans. Father Miguel's call to freedom also marked the separation of Hispanic America from the mother country. Indeed, the colonists no longer thought of themselves as Spaniards. They were the beginning of something new, a separate culture, a Mexican culture. In 1821, after many setbacks, two powerful Hispanic leaders emerged. Agustin de Iturbide, a military officer who authored the Plan de Iguala, the Mexican Declaration of Independence, and Vicente Guerrero, a rebel general who would later serve as president of Mexico. Through their united efforts, Mexico won its freedom from Spain. As a result, a true North American Hispanic identity could now emerge. Over the next 30 years, that Hispanic identity in the former northern colonies would undergo a metamorphosis, stemming from encounters with Anglo-Americans immigrating into Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California, the influx of American goods, changes in land systems and legal systems, and a continual influx of Hispanics from Mexico. Today, that metamorphosis is ongoing. The 21st century Hispanic American community is one of the most dynamic cultures in the United States. Hispanics are the fastest growing segment of the U.S. population. They have achieved greatness in business, science, literature, art, athletics, education, and culture.
Even before Mexico gained independence from Spain, the northern colonists, Texas, New Mexico, and California, began forming their own unique identity, separate from one dictated by Spain, one that would form today's Hispanic American identity, one that is industrious and creative. Join me, Patricia Lopez, for this fourth episode of A History of Hispanic Achievement in America. Thanks for watching. For information about how to obtain a copy of this program or the entire DVD gift set of A History of Hispanic Achievement in America, visit our website, www.ambrosevideo.com. That's ambrosevideo.com.